Hi, I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
And welcome back to Disney Deciphered, and welcome back from Disneyland. Leslie, you spent a couple nights in Disneyland and some lessons learned. You were there for a conference and also Dusty from MiceChat's Gumball Rally. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the conference, give that conference a little bit of, well, maybe it doesn't need. It's for like publisher or not publishers. It's for like, I don't want to call you an influencer. It's for content creators, right?
Content
The conference.
creators. Yes, that's the
Thank
new
you, thank
term.
you, thank you. Yes. So
We're not
tell us a little about
influencers
the
anymore.
conference and the Gumball Rally. Well, you still influence me, Leslie.
All right, all right. So, yes, it was a conference run by my friend Becca of This Crazy Adventure called Life, and she's been doing it since a couple years pre-COVID, and it's really small. It's a small group of theme park bloggers, I would say, and YouTubers and other content creators and things like that. So, small group, always a good time. It's an excuse, Joe, for me to get to Disneyland pretty much every February. So, which I love, because it's during Lunar New Year. So win-win for Leslie and definitely a lot of fun. But this year, Becca set up the conference to be on the weekend of what's called the Gumball Rally. And this is like a 20-year tradition that Dusty Sage from the Disney website MiceChat has been putting on. This is kind of it's an event, but it's also a competition. And the goal is to go to the parks and ride as many rides as possible. But it's different than, say, like the Every Ride Challenge or the Parkeology Challenge, because there's a scavenger hunt element to it as well. So it's not just about how many rides can you ride and what's the total. It's about finding things in the park, spotting things on rides. Things are worth different levels of points. So it's a much more complex experience, and every year the theme is different, the rules are different. This year they'd had it as a murder mystery, so we had to uncover who got murdered, who the murderer was, what the murder weapon was, and then where the murder happened. And this year was actually the first year it was in Disney California Adventure instead of Disneyland, so that really changed things up. But people come back to this year after year after year. There's a huge community around it. Several hundred people participate, and it's quite the event. So glad to get to experience it, because I'd heard about it for years and never had gotten to do it.
Can you give me an example? Like, you say it's a scavenger hunt and a challenge. Just give me an example of like what that looks like. Is it like you must take a picture at the attraction where, and then they give you some hint, and you got to figure out what it like, what's the scavenger hunt aspect of this? Because it sounds like it could be fun, but I'm maybe I'm just being slow today, having trouble visualizing what these clues might be. And how do you even solve a murder mystery?
So, I mean, some of the things are you have to observe things on the ride, and that helps prove that you rode the ride. Sometimes you take a ride photo, and I guess theoretically you could take a ride photo on a lot of things, but they're trying to tell you to not get your cameras out, on roller coasters and things like that. So, for example, on the Incredicoaster, the clue was, what happens what is Jack doing in the third tunnel? And so I've ridden a Incredicoaster hundreds of times, and I
can't tell
roughly
you
know what
Bouncing
he
around?
does generally. Well, there's right. There's different powers that he has. I think I didn't end up riding the Incredicoaster, but like I know in one of the tunnels he starts replicating. I was like, well, is that the second tunnel? Is that the third tunnel? I don't know. I've got to ride the ride with that in mind with the clue book. So that's part of it, and that you get the point for riding that ride. But there was a whole other section to the booklets that we were given where you literally were just going to a store in Cars Land and finding the license plate with this city on it and pulling off what that license plate said. And they actually had us fill in the blank in one of the booklets. And each blank that we filled in, there was like one letter they would pull from that. And then you would put those letters together to give you the next clue to try to solve like who the murderer was. We ended up at one point where we went to all these places, we got these clues, it added up to a single clue that was like in 515 something something something. And then they said, go to each of these lands and find this clue, and that land will be the place where the murder happened. Well, I mean, in 515, I'm like, license plate, got to be in Cars Land. Wasn't in Cars Land. It was the number on the plane in Grizzly Peak Airfield on the side of the plane that's right there by Soren. And so that was where the murder happened, in Grizzly Peak Airfield.
It's like Clue. It's like happened in Grizzly Peak with the candlestick.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, that sounds pretty fun. I know that you were also just trying to do research in general, so it must have been stressful. So you ended up not solving the murder, it sounds like. You were in the wrong place.
I'm trying to think. I think we got the answer for each of the who did it, where, blah blah blah. But we didn't get in enough rides to be competitive, and that was purposeful. I was on a team with two other bloggers, but they were all like me. They only go, a few times a year and needed
Creating
to
content.
Yes,
is what you were doing.
We were eating Lunar New Year food, Joe. Come on, come on. So, but I should mention there's also additional rules and restrictions to hamstring you. So you cannot use Lightning Lane, you cannot use Single Rider, and again, these rules are different every year. You cannot use the Disneyland app. So we couldn't mobile order, we couldn't look up wait times, any of that. So this felt. This is the Disneyland version of raw dogging. It was.
I was gonna say, wow, this sounded so fun, and then at the very end, you come with this whopper where you can't use lightning lanes. You can't even use the app. So
No.
But that sounds awesome, though. How can people participate? Like, did you have to pay registration to participate, or you just kind of just sign up and then you get info? I assume they're starting to put together next year's already.
Yeah, they always put together next year's. If you go to MiceChat, they have a place with information about the Gumball Rally. It is a ticketed event, so you pay a ticket because you get to do the pre-event before and the party afterwards. And they got to pay to print up all those nice glossy clue books and things like that. This was really complicated this year. They had 4 clue books, and you could not get your next one until you turned in your first one. So we were having to run lots and lots and lots of steps covered. Just shy of 29,000 steps, Joe.
Sounds like a lot of fun, and we will put the link in the show notes to, if the Gumball Rally for 2026 isn't available yet, MiceChat, there's Leslie, I'm sure you can pick one of Dusty's articles that we can share with the people. So that sounds great. Sounds like it was a lot of fun. Sounds like you had fun at the conference. Where did you stay?
I stayed at the Hojo, which is always a favorite, just as good as ever. Great walking distance location and fun, a lot of fun with younger kids. Obviously I didn't have kids with me this time, but their water park there is one of the better ones in the area.
And is that the one, just remind me, just for people and also for myself, because I had someone asking about offsite stuff. That is the one that you can also get bunk beds in the room if you want, even in it's not even considered like a suite yet. It's a different room type, but it's still not like a jump in price. Am I right? Am I getting that correctly?
That is correct, especially in Building 1. They've renovated different buildings at different times, but Building 1, which is their tower, some of the room types have bunk beds, and I've stayed in that room with my kids before, so that's really nice. And it's not usually a huge price increase over just the standard 2-queen room. And some of those also have fireworks views. Where they're located, sort of across from Disneyland, is kind of behind the castle, and so you really get a great view of where they're shooting the fireworks off from. So that might be worth the splurge if you're staying in that and are getting one of those bunk bed rooms.
All right, and then one more thing to add, Leslie. Episode 356, a couple episodes ago, we talked about the best times to visit Disneyland, and we were talking about Seasons of the Force at Disneyland, and we were talking about how they were going to have things, but we didn't know what the things were. Well, we know what the things are now. Luke Skywalker is going to be there. There's a new projection show. We had talked about the fireworks being the music and the stuff being different if you're watching it from Galaxy's Edge. Well, they're going to do some projections, so that's going to be different. And they announced some other things as well. So just want to update that on episode 356. Since we're talking about Disneyland today, it does sound like Seasons of the Force, which is running from March to May-ish, is going to be pretty cool.
Yes, and you were getting this in real time because the press release just hit my inbox an hour ago from when we were recording this with a bunch of the Seasons of the Force kind of stuff. So apologize for giving that maybe the short shrift. It looks like it's going to be a little more robust this year, so glad to see it.
Well, we didn't know. So we didn't know what we didn't know. But yes, follow Brooke McDonald on social media. That's how I got all these tips. I saw it like two. I didn't even know it came out today. I just saw she posted. I guess because she posted it must have come out today. But I saw it 2 hours ago. A new story in Savi's as well with the lightsaber making. So that's cool too. Token, be fair to Florida comment here. None of this is happening in Batu East. Although I don't know if I love Luke Skywalker walking around like he's Mark Hamill in my head, and just kind of got to stay with that. So it's like when what's his face, Star Lord walks around. Sometimes it's like a little weird, or Doctor Strange walking around in Avengers Campus. It's always like a little bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how much they look like the person. Isn't it? I forget whether it's World or Land where they have. I think it's Land where they have the guy that looks just like young Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow. Like it's like people think it's actually Johnny Depp, and then people are like, "Oh, he's actually too young for current Johnny Depp." But yeah, sometimes they really can do a lot, especially if they're wearing head coverings in some way. So we'll see how good the match is.
Yeah, Black Widow with the wig usually pulls it off pretty well. So that's a good point. Anyway, that is neither here nor there. Big aside right there. Let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, Leslie, you made some mistakes or learned some things at Disneyland because you were doing things a little bit differently than you normally do them. No lightning lane. Insane. Let's talk about it when we come back. All right, Leslie. So you did not do Park Hopper. You didn't have lightning lane. So what are some of the lessons you learned as you were wandering around Disney's California Adventure as a normal guest, a raw dogging guest?
As a mere mortal. So, I mean, yes, I think this was actually a valuable experiment because it made me do Disneyland in a way, or Disney California Adventure in a way that I never would voluntarily do it. So, I think the first lesson I learned is that you really can skip park hopper at Disneyland. And this is something that I don't think I've ever done. And now that we had the big price increases last fall at Disneyland, making park hopper that much more expensive, because it used to be it was $65 for the length of ticket. So I understood why people skipped it on 1 or 2 day tickets, but I didn't understand why people would skip it on a 5 day ticket because, gosh, your per day cost is pretty low. Well, now it goes up to $105 for those longer tickets. So a lot more people are sort of running the numbers and are wondering, gosh, is it really worth it for paying for this extra price premium for park hopper, or should I use my money for something like lightning lane? So this was a really great experiment for me. You can fill a day at the smaller of the two Disneyland parks without needing to park hop. So it's just about how you choose to spend your day and what you plan out. And I had plenty that I was able to do over the course of a full day. The competition ended at 6 p.m., but we stayed in the parks a little bit longer. So definitely can fill a day. So consider that. If you're on a budget, I give you permission, even though it hurts. And at some point, maybe I'll skip it myself on a real trip.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I guess for me, Disneyland's so far away. I'm like, I might as well have the park hopper. But I do really feel like, especially if you're like on a 2 day trip, there's something to be said about just focusing on one park and not worrying, because what happens when you get the park hopper is you see something like, maybe you see like there are shorter lines at Disneyland right now. So let me just run across over there. But it's not, I mean, it's close, but it's not like that close. And then sometimes you may end up being inefficient. So that definitely, I think, is good advice. It is tough for me to swallow, but I will accept it. You are the Disneyland expert after all. So if you're giving me permission, then it must be okay. Because you didn't have lightning lane, I'm guessing that you were really pressed for time. Like, did you end up rope dropping? Like, how did you find things were working with, like, I mean, we always say minutes matter. I feel like without lightning lane, they matter even more.
Yes, exactly. And that was the big takeaway for me to actually experience that, because what happened for the Gumball Rally was we did rope drop, and this was Saturday, which meant that there were no early entry guests in DCA. The park that had early entry that day was Disneyland. So we were not at a disadvantage being off site because, everybody was at the same rope at 8 o'clock. But the rules of the rally were that we were going first to the seating area overlooking the lagoon, or the standing area where people watch World of Color, because we were taking the group photo for the Gumball Rally. So that took about 10, 12, 15 minutes at the key moment of the day on a Saturday morning. And I should mention too, this was actually the day that Red Car Trolley closed at DCA, which is, I mean, it's closing permanently, which is that trolley that goes down Buena Vista Street. So a day that kind of was like a big, and it also was the 24th anniversary of Disney California Adventure, the day itself. So lots of stuff going on. So we were 15 minutes into the day before we got our first clue book, and we could start making a beeline for the rides. So minutes really do matter. And by the time we started making our way around rides, we were just immediately hamstrung. We went first to Web Slingers, which I rope drop all the time. That's actually a popular attraction for my family to rope drop because it's right there. It's a great strategic location. And we had to wait for 15 minutes for Web Slingers because, I mean, you know, and that's not even that popular anymore. So that was a bummer. But we knew that was, I mean, everybody was at the same disadvantage for the competition.
No single rider?
Not allowed to use single rider. No, not allowed.
What are these? Dusty completely sandbagging all of you, making you take a picture at rope drop, not letting you use single rider. So, I mean, 15 minutes isn't bad, but you feel like if you rope drop Web Slingers, you're like
you walk right on. Exactly. And then that's 15 more minutes that you're behind for the next attraction. So that's what we were finding. It really cascaded throughout our day. Like I go to DCA a lot, and I actually usually ride Incredicoaster, not first thing, but within the first 30 to 45 minutes if I want a really short wait. And by the time we got over to Incredicoaster, because this was a busy Saturday for a lot of reasons, the line was already 45 minutes long. And so this cascaded throughout our day, whereas if we had been 15 minutes earlier, the line would have been that much shorter. So this is really important. So this is just something I think I want to drive home to listeners. Minutes really do matter. I know it's hard to get those teenagers up, but like every 5 minutes they're late can cost you 30 more minutes in line. So it's really worth it to get up and get going at Disneyland, especially if you find yourself at a higher crowd period, because we're working with all of these, you know, locals in the park who are there for whatever their own reasons are, and kind of getting in the way of vacations.
I'm just cracking up. Teenagers, famously in tune with opportunity costs. Every time you tell them that 5 minutes here means 30 minutes there, they always are up for the delayed gratification. But yeah, or whatever the opposite
you don't have
you don't
have one yet. You don't have one yet.
Oh.
You teach them, but you don't have one yet in your household, Joe. So
I mean, no one cares, but I gave students an extra 3 days to study for the test, and nobody used it. And so their opportunity cost for not spending an hour studying was quite great today. Google Forms grades your test for you, for all you teachers out there. But anyway, yeah, teenagers. Continue.
All right. Well, third lesson learned, and I've kind of hinted at this already. You really need to pay attention to the locals effect at Disneyland. This was a Saturday during the Lunar New Year Food Festival. The locals come out for that. If their Magic Keys are not blocked out, if the reservations aren't gone for Magic Keys, they are coming, they are filling the parks. And when we happened to be there, there had actually been pretty much rain all week, all over Southern California. And the Saturday that we were having the Gumball Rally was the first day post rain. So it was that much more crowded because folks who had some flexibility, you know, were canceling their earlier days when they saw the forecast and moving it to Saturday. So we had some serious crowds. This was probably the busiest that I've seen DCA in the last couple of years. And that's not because, I mean, it certainly has been busier. There have been busier days than that, but I just haven't been there on those busier days. I tend to go midweek, and, you know, I tend to zig when other people zag, and this put me in the thick of things. So really do pay attention. Saturdays and Sundays at DCA during food festivals get really crowded. And it does impact the lines to an extent, but it also just impacts everything in the park. I mean, just pathways feel really crowded, and you're walking through, and the lines at the food festival booths were longer than I've ever experienced in years and years and years and years, and that's frustrating. So it does reduce your efficiency overall.
I was thinking about it. I can't remember what festival was going on in California Adventure when we were there, but it just feels like because the food lines are like pushing out into the walkways, then it just has this knock-on effect where it's tough to get. I like would love to see someone do an analysis if the days where Magic Keys are blocked out, even though they're most expensive for outside guests, like I wonder if the crowd levels overall feel the same or even better. Because you can imagine, I know that Christmas holidays, Thanksgiving, stuff like that are really busy, but still, like all these Magic Key holders who have the lower Magic Keys aren't coming. And sounds like you got the same exact effect that we had when it was warm in Epcot, and then all of a sudden Epcot was completely slammed with people.
Yeah, exactly. And this really is pretty variable and it's a little bit hard to predict. I mean, there are all these things that got perfectly aligned on our trip. You have the Food Festival weekend, you have the red car trolley closure date, you have the rain, and then it kind of just ended up being the perfect storm. And it still wasn't unpleasant. Let me be clear. I mean, I've been much busier days at Disneyland over the course of my life, but for a Saturday in early February that isn't a holiday, that was bizarre.
All right, now another thing I know that is great for people without Lightning Lane, especially if you are a Disney person, but even if you're not a Disney person, you get to check out the things that you don't check out because you're focused on Lightning Lanes. For me, it was, well, I went to It's Tough to Be a Bug to say goodbye. See ya. But I also went to Enchanted Tiki Room, which I hadn't been to for like 10 years, just because I think I did have Lightning Lanes, but it was a short line and I just checked it out. So there are times when the standby lines have built up so much that it's not worth it. California Adventure, does it have shows or attractions that have pretty short lines that you can check out when you don't feel like waiting in a standby line, but still want some form of entertainment?
Yes, and this was the part that I love best about the Gumball Rally Challenge was it made me do the things that I skip because, I'm always focused on riding the rides. And so this was a great lesson for me. Do those things that you skip, especially when you hit a wall with lines. And we ended up doing Turtle Talk with Crush. A lot of things are around Hollywood Land, like in the animation building. That's where Turtle Talk with Crush is. There's Philhar Magic nearby. There's Animation Academy where you draw an animated character. So we did all of those things. And I was reminded how special and enjoyable a lot of them are. I love Turtle Talk with Crush. I don't think I've actually ever done it at Disneyland. And if I've done it at Walt Disney World, it was a long time ago, certainly not in recent memory. And the way they ask the questions of the little kids and the little kids participate, totally, totally precious. And we had some great questions and great interactions. And I was rolling with laughter on some of them. Thought it was excellent, excellent, excellent. I will be taking my son especially on that one when we visit next time. So it made me sort of rediscover some things that I have definitely pushed down the list and was very grateful for that. So don't overlook them. Just because there's not like a long line for it doesn't mean it's not good and it won't add to your Disney day.
I'm glad you had that experience. I did not feel same way about Enchanted Tiki Room. I'm glad I got to see it. I'm good for another 10 years. And yeah, but Disney World wise, stuff like Country Bears, Indiana Jones Stunt Show, even the Frozen sing along, which a lot of people are going to go to some of those because, or Frozen at least because, Frozen. But I think that's great advice. And also I think that is a reminder that you and I are crazy, but guess what? You don't actually have to buy Lightning Lane on every single day of your trip, Disneyland or Walt Disney World. And then the days you don't have it, you can check out all these other things that are a big theater. So you're going to be able to sit in there. By the way, if you're going to Walt Disney World before June, don't forget to go to Muppet Vision 3D.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so the last lesson I learned from this trip, park tickets have gotten a lot more expensive. And I paid Joe $206 for my non-hopper into DCA that day. The day that this Gumball Rally was scheduled. No Lightning Lane. The day the Gumball Rally was scheduled happened to be a tier 6 day, the highest one-day ticket that Disneyland sells. Same as Christmas Day, Joe. Same. I paid $206 to go to DCA. So it is very expensive. The tickets prices have really gone up. And I thought about doing a partial day, a 2-day ticket, and then doing a partial day one of the days around the conference. But the ticket prices are just too high for me to justify doing that. So I instead went to Downtown Disney 2 of the nights that I was there. And it's in a big state of construction, a big state of flux right now, but they've opened a lot more in the last couple of months. And I think if you find yourself being like, can I justify the extra 1 day on the ticket? Skip it and go spend that time, especially if it's a partial day in downtown Disney. I went and ate at Din Tai Fung, the Asian restaurant, mostly kind of dim sum, dumplings, things like that. It was fantastic. So good. One of the best meals I've had all year, and love doing that. Went and just did some window shopping and walked around and saw all the new shops, which was a lot of fun. And so there's a new grassy area with a stage down by the end, down by the Disneyland Hotel end of downtown Disney where Din Tai Fung is. And so when the weather's nice, people are kind of sitting on that grass. There's a little hill the kids can run up and down and get off some energy. So they're turning this into more of a hangout destination. Still has a long way to go, but it's getting there. And I'm glad to see, because Disney Springs has been so much more of a destination at Walt Disney World for so long. And be fair to California. They're finally being fair.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, right. I'm just processing this because you texted me when you went, but was that your first time to Din Tai Fung ever?
Yes. We don't have them in Northern California.
Oh,
It was really good. Really, really,
I
really
thought you were
good.
like, I thought you were like the normal excited for when people go, but they've been there before. But that was like a first time thing. I love it. It's a lot of soup dumplings, but also like my kids. Ugh, this is the worst. They're so Americanized, but they really like the fried rice there. And so we usually get that, and we get some of the sides. And of course, Chinese vegetables. They are my kids' favorite kind of vegetables, the only vegetables that they all agree on. So Din Tai Fung is great. Why don't you share a little bit? Because I know it's a tough reservation to get, and you got reservations. Might as well close this out with a little bit of a food reservation recommendation for Din Tai Fung at downtown Disney.
Yes, so the reservations are not on the Disneyland app. You have to go to Yelp, their usual reservation system. They open 30 days in advance, and I cannot remember what time of day it was that I did it. I think I must have stayed up till midnight. I think I must have. But it all blurs together now. But I was able to get 2 6-stop reservations, which was, pretty challenging. So most families will have something easier than that. Was able to, get in. You still have a little bit of a wait. You still have a little bit of a queue, but I think it's absolutely worth it. And you can cancel up to 2 hours in advance. So go ahead and make that reservation at 30 days. And then if your plans change, then, you can even cancel the day of. So highly, highly, highly recommend. Chinese vegetables. Green beans were the best green beans I've ever eaten, Joe. So good.
Oh yeah. A little spicy. Yeah. Suji do, if anyone who knows is listening. All right. Leslie, that was a bonus Disney do, but what is your actually Disney do or don't for us from your quick trip down to Disneyland?
So my Disney do try to find your Disney community. I know we have a lot of listeners out there who go a lot, and getting to sort of see the window into this community was really lovely. I mean, these people get together every year, and they have their habits and the things that they do together, which is great. And there's so many of these Disney communities that exist on both coasts. I mean, I've got my friend Casey of Disneyland Daily. She does an event every year called Pearls in the Park. Good Southern girl wearing her pearls to Disneyland. There are so many different niches. I mean, Dapper Days, or people who go on Star Wars Day, and so many different groups of people that I think you can find both online and then ultimately in real life, to meet up with. So if you're somebody who goes to Disney a lot, it adds a lot to be able to find these groups that are a fit for you. So I was glad to be a guest in this Disney community this time, and, just see all of the different ways that people enjoy doing Disney.
Yeah, I love that. We are starting to get some external pressure for a Disney Deciphered adults only meetup. So who knows? Maybe we'll be that community. Right now, we don't have the bandwidth, though, unless you want to volunteer to be a party planner. All right, that's enough for this episode. Leslie, I really appreciate it. It sounded like you had a ton of fun. The Gumball Rally sounds like a lot of fun outside of the no lightning lane nonsense. But I guess it was good because, you got to experience Disneyland a different way overall. So thank you for sharing your experience with us. Where can people find your work on the internet? Where can they find all the content that you create to influence us with?
That's right. How to actually use Lightning Lane. Tripswithhikes.com is the blog, at Trips with Hikes everywhere on social media. Joe, where can folks find you?
You can find me at As Joe Flies all over social media. If you're looking to plan a Disney or otherwise trip, you can email me, josephchung@travelmation.net. Also, if you want to reach out to the podcast, you can email us disneydeciphered@gmail.com. Find us on social media, Disney Deciphered. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it. And other than that, Leslie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I will see you getting your clue board together for MiceChat's Gumball Rally 2026.
Thanks, Joe.